Hey everyone, welcome to Mama Star X channel. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about what is going on with the planet's root chakra. So as you know, we have energy centers within our esoteric body. Well, our planet has it too. There are different places around the world where these energy centers are located. And the one that I'm going to talk about in this video, it's located in Australia, in the center region of Australia, and is known as Uluru. I was able to go there a few years ago when I met my husband, and the energy is quite intense. And although it happens to be the lowest energy center in our body, I felt the energy most intense in my head. So I think that how we feel the energy in those centers, it relates within those changes that we're going through in that moment. So for me, it was in the head. I felt like my crown was open the entire time, and there was a lot of buzzing. But I had the opportunity to walk around the rock. It's just huge, beautiful rock. Of course, it's inside a national park, so all of this land is owned by their government, just like we have a lot of sacred sites around the states or around the world that used to be owned or used to be part of the native land, and the government took over. So in Australia, we have the root chakra, and as you know, and as you've been keeping up with the news right now, is going through a process of purification. So a lot of these fires that are taking place in that part of the world, although it's known that Australia, the environment or the climate is conducive to create these fires, it's now escalated to a degree that is destroying a lot of these beautiful places that I used to know. My husband was from there, so I had the opportunity not only to live there for a little bit at a time, but also to travel all around the East Coast and visit many of these places that are now completely destroyed. Now, of course, this hasn't been an easy process for me, but being that I am in this path of change and ascension and expanding my consciousness, I do get that this is part of the process, that this is one of those things that ourselves go through in order to change. So this idea of ascension that we are exploring during this time talks about being able to change ourselves in a different way. And it's more connected to our origins. It's more connected to the idea of spirit, of vibration, of frequencies. So when we are finally gotten to a place where we've experienced something one and again and again and again, we've decided, that's it. How many times more can I experience the same thing? So this is where, we were in a 3D. So in the third dimension, we were in a state of consciousness where we explore all different ideas. But each one of those ideas had two aspects, and they were quite extreme. So our ability to reconcile those two things would determine our one, level of understanding in the matter, and two, whether we understood it wide enough or broader enough to not create an imbalance. So third dimension was that vibrational place where we stayed for quite some time, where energy moved very slowly to the point that would sometimes makes us believe that we were all separate. And in that separation, we made a lot of choices that we can see today that there were choices, but were not necessarily demonstrating or expressing the concept of oneness. So we did that long enough, and then I think, got to that point where we said, okay, we explore all the options, it's time to change. And this was basically the year of 2012, where our consciousness started to show more of that understanding, right? So 2012, there were many tribes that had prophecies and predictions. But what they were talking about was that it was the window of time where we finally were going to move across to enter in a time of change. And this change was going to have an effect that will, for a bit, create a little bit of chaos. But the more we move into the change and the more we adapted and felt comfortable with it, we would find the needed equilibrium to now navigate in another vibrational place. So we moved little by little from third dimension reality into the fourth. And in this space, we need to navigate differently. We have to accept that there are different conditions, as well as we need to utilize different aspects of our mechanism to allow us to navigate in that reality. And the most important thing was for us to understand the nature of our reality, to finally remember and recognize that we're more than a physical expression. And as we start operating within that frame of mind, we could activate certain markers within our DNA that would allow us to explore reality in a different way. Of course, just like anything, when we start trying something new, it takes a little bit of getting used to. And during that cycle, we tend to struggle. But we get to a point that things settle down and we are in better control again. Well, this is kind of what we're going through. Now, all of these changes, all of this idea of ascension, it begins with the idea of cleansing the center of energy that is known the root, because that's our first center. It's kind of like when you look at moving in a building up, you have maybe 4 floors or 7 floors, okay? Just like we do with energy centers. So you always begin from the ground up. And once you explore the first floor, the next logical thing is to move to the second floor. So our second floor tends to be our fourth dimension reality. And the conditions of that reality is to use that center of energy that allow us to perceive reality as one. And it is the place in which we can navigate more efficiently without causing too many imbalances. Now, we don't just stop there. We continue to elevate into the fifth dimension, which is that area or space, if you want to call it, where now we're used to. And now we understand energy as one. And instead of thinking to be, we just get to be. But we can only create that state by being conscientious of how to create it. And this is what we're going through. So not only are we going through this process of change, and when I say we, I'm talking about the collective, the consciousness of humanity. Now, in this process, not everybody decided to change. And not everybody needs to change in order to help our planet change. This is where things get a little bit confusing and complicated. And that is that our planet has decided to do the same. Now, there are many people that are investigating different areas about the history of our consciousness. Not just about our consciousness, but the history of humanity. So as you can see, a lot of us have learned a particular history. But with this era of information and technology advancements, we are able to see other things that we couldn't see before. And this is where we're starting to remember and learn that the reality that we have accustomed ourselves to live is not just black and white. There's other shades of gray that are a basic and an important component of who we are. So we have lived in a reality where there was many gaps about the expansion of our consciousness, and now we're being able to access the information that can fill in those gaps and makes better sense about who we are and what we need to do in this time of transformation. And one of those things is being able to share the things that we're learning and understanding with one another, because each one of us contains a piece of the puzzle. So when I see Australia, I see an energy center that is going through a process of purification in the same way we do. And in order to be able to navigate in a new frequency, we have to prepare the grounds, right? We have to go through that removing and cleansing and breaking away in order to allow a new energy to be. So in other words, we live in a reality where there's no such a thing as empty space. And before, the model that we were abiding by was that when we would break away from something or a concept that we didn't agree with, we would change, but we were not conscientiously of the changes that we were making. This time around, we need to be. Because whether we believe it or not, we're always participating. And that participation has a lot to do with the way that you project your creative power. So the way that you feel about yourself, the gifts that you have within yourself, it is part of existence. And it's a part that is as important and as anybody else's. And in the way that you decide to explore it and express it is going to contribute to the collective consciousness. So your identity is very much needed and is just as important as is an important piece of the rest of the collective. So part of this change is that we have to take responsibility of our own mechanism or our own vibration, the things that we are receiving and translating and projecting to contribute to a reality that is made of different frequencies, of different energies that have the ability to project back what you're doing. So all of these life experiences that we're having with one another are only expressing and reflecting our understanding of things, the way that we're capable to deal with, emotions. They're not just there to get to you or to prove to you that you're not good enough, to challenge your self-worth. They're only there reflecting what you already know. Knowing this, doesn't it help you? At least it did for me. It gave me such a relief, especially to know that I am not at the mercy of my destiny. And the best part is to finally become aware that I don't have to be in control of everything outside of me in order to create harmony. As a matter of fact, that the only thing that I have control over is myself. And that when I start changing myself, the reflection or the events around me will start changing. So these are all parts of this new wave of information and energy that we are using to operate in a different vibrational place. And as we're changing our energy and our frequency, guess what? We're also creating an impact in our environment. Now, the best part is that our home, this planet, right, is our home while we're here, has decided to do the same. And is doing it in the same center of energy that we're working with right now. And you got to ask yourself, why the root chakra? Why starting there? Well, it's the same way. Why, if you're going to climb a mountain, you start from the bottom? Why, if you're going to start a business, you do the same? Why, if you're going to enter into a building, you always start from the bottom floor? Now, it doesn't always have to be that way in more advanced places or realities, but to be able to get a handle of energy and master the knowledge, we have to start somewhere. We have to use some sort of, structure to, get there. But we're doing it little by little, donkey steps, but we're doing it. Now, the most important thing is, and the reason why I'm doing this video is, what can we do at this time when there's so many different catastrophes or situations in our society that are not very positive? What are we going to do when we can see that the collective is separating in two ways? One that is reflecting a system or belief that is outdated, and sometimes we can perceive them as very negative, or could be very narrow-minded or very stubborn, while the other one is becoming more flexible, more sensitive to the change, more adaptable, and is willing to accept that reality is malleable. It doesn't have to be black and white. So what can we do? Well, this is where I feel that going after information, wisdom, and knowledge will be important, or will be one of the options. Because within this knowledge, remember, it brings a particular frequency. And that frequency, as you translate it into the emotions, which is energy emotions, is going to feel differently. And as it feels differently, it's changing your frequency. And as you raise your frequency, everything around you is going to change too. And as you become more conscientious of how to remain focused in that path, you can then find the equilibrium. And within that equilibrium, you can shift into a reality that is now more representative of who you are. So this is more about becoming than thinking. This is more about being than wanting to be. But it requires us to go through this very painful transitions. So planet Earth happens to be our habitat. And if we have not transformed ourselves quick enough to remove a lot of those imbalances that we've created over time, who do you think is going to do it? If you're not there to do the work, who do you think is going to do it? Well, in this case, it's our planet. Our planet is intelligent, is an entity that is alive, and that carries many different consciousness. So we're not the only smart consciousness here, or the only intelligent one. There are many other ones. But we separated ourselves into a vibrational space where we really bought into the idea that we were the best thing. And then when we could not compare ourselves to the other consciousness because we forgot that's part of that, third dimensional reality, we started doing it with ourselves. And then we started using these reasons of race, color, sexual orientation, beliefs. And as you could see in that reality, we always found a reason as to why to be in conflict. Because there's one that thought was better than the other. When in reality, everything counts. So now we are breaking away. And not everybody's doing it. Not everybody's doing it. But those of you who have chosen to do this, this is the time where we are most vulnerable. And it's the time where we have to be careful we don't get pulled into a direction that is full of deceit. Because we are moving away from models where we've created where only one thing brings prosperity, where one thing is what determines the quality of our lives. And in this case, we chose money. So out of all the natural resources and out of all the possibilities that we can have that can bring satisfaction and success, we just use one model, and it's money. And my question to you is, well, how is money helping right now Australia and other countries that are going through this atmospheric devastations in helping them to regain their sanity, or at least to be able to control their environment? How is that helping? Why is it that the only option that we have to create prosperity has to be described within the concept of money? Many thousands of years ago, there were civilizations where money didn't exist. And we have to be careful about our judgments, because for a bit there, we were bought into the idea, or we bought into the idea that many of these civilizations were very primitive, when in reality, they're not. Now we're discovering that many of the civilizations that are under the earth and under the water could have been way more advanced than we are today. And my question is, how, if they were more advanced than we were, what happened to them? How come they don't exist anymore? So we have a tendency through our logic and our ego to create this idea and belief that we own everything, that as we're in this journey exploring this reality, that we have control, when in reality all we have control over is ourselves. So as we are going through this change, what are we going to do? Because all of this, structures and models that we've used in the past, we already know that they don't work. We create a government that it's become so obvious. And we know that they're not necessarily looking after our best interests. And why is it that we still go through the same process of every 4 years elect, when it doesn't matter who we elect for the last 10 cycles of voting, that is the same thing. So going back to this idea of root chakra, so this is a doorway that deals with the type of structures and relationships that we create and these realities of form. And as we're learning to understand who we are, and we're awakening to that understanding, and we're becoming it, we are changing our DNA. Our mechanism is changing. And within that change, we also are shifting into realities that are very different than before. But that breakaway, or that process of change, we may experience it in different ways. And one of them is seeing how this, phenomena that are taking place, this, devastations of climate change. But remember, you never stop creating. Never. So as you're moving through this, shifts, you still are, a creative being that have a creative force, and you always constantly using that energy to create, to project. But right now, you can do it conscientiously. And you got to ask yourself, what am I going to do as I see all of these things around me that are wrong? What am I going to do about it? How am I going to contribute to make the change? And sometimes it doesn't require you to be a hero or to create an invention where you're recognized worldwide. Sometimes it could be the most simple thing. And it's just how you live your life minute to minute. So right now, the Aboriginals of that region in Uluru are going to get together. Now, this is where I'm not very sure if it's going to be the 12th exactly. I think that it's going to be more around the full moon, which is in our hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere, in in this part of the world. You know what I mean? It's going to be on the 10th. There's also going to be a lunar eclipse. So we know that this year there's going to be up to 6 eclipses. And these are doorways where we have access to a lot of energy. And that energy can accelerate and can speed up things a lot. So the Aboriginals of that area are planning to do or perform a ceremony to activate that energy center. They tried back in 2010. A lot of times why people don't know these things, because you gotta remember the history of these poor people. At some point in the evolution of our consciousness, some races decided to feel that they were superior than the other ones. And what do they do? And what are we still doing with this Aboriginal people or this native people? Every land that you go to, you always hear a similar story of these people being ripped away from their land, being abused. Their, memory and consciousness was corrupted. We see them as inferior people, when in reality, all they had was the knowledge of how to not only coexist with our habitat, but also how to survive in case of disasters. So our planet has always exhibited for many years changes. And although we have contributed to some of these imbalances, the planet still changes. So she has cycles within cycles, just like we do. And we're getting very close to that time where either the pole has started to shift or there's going to be a shift, where many predict that some of those places that have gone underwater, those continents that have been lost over time, are going to resurface, while some of the ones that are above are going to go under. And you got to ask yourself, what would I do if that happened? I was doing the other day a video in Spanish. I'm trying to make my channel bilingual. And it's not easy because these things require time. But I love it. And even if nobody comes to hear my video, I'm still loving it. But ask yourself, what would happen if we have a catastrophe worldwide, where technology wouldn't be a part of it, where you couldn't depend on your cell phone or your, computer, or even have food in the stores provided to you in the way that we've created it? Not enough water, just like Australia, where, your life is a priority and you have to, be constantly a guard because something can change 1 minute to the next without you knowing. How would you cope? And this is part of this test that we're going through. So what we're seeing today around the world are just expressions of our inner conflicts, not just as an individual, but as a collective. And I don't know if you notice, but when there are situations like what we're having with Australia, that it's our planet demonstrating something or trying to communicate something, haven't you noticed how our politicians tend to create some sort of experience or decision that represents a choice that can create a lot of fear? A lot of our knowledge, we cannot get it from the normal means of communication. We have to go to other places to find it. Why? Because a lot of what we see is very negative. And I can see this with the people that I love, my parents, and especially the older generation, that they're constantly married in front of the TV. And they're being bombarded by all of this negativity. And all they're doing is cultivating fear. So, once upon a time, our elders were people filled with knowledge. And the youngsters would go to them in those moments of struggle to seek help. To find clarity. And today, what happened to them? So we have, over time, shifted. And the people that we were meant to look up to, today we put them away. And we cannot rely on them because they're filled with fear. And this is what you want for you. Because my friends, we're all growing old. Just because right now you're young and filled with life, don't think that at least in this reality is going to continue that way. And you got to ask yourself, as I'm moving forward and aging in this reality, how do I want to end my years? Somebody feeble, filled with fears, and set aside with nothing to offer? Doesn't have to be that way. We've been programmed to think that, oh yes, that's all there is left. So while we're dealing with that, we are spending a lot of time trying to change our surface, because maybe we can hide a little bit and kind of pretend for a little bit that things are okay. Look, I still look good. When in reality, beneath those layers, we are desperate, disappointed, lost. Our insecurities are eating us away. And I can share this because part of my other business is work in the beauty industry. And I've done it long enough to see it. I worked for many years with many different women. And women are powerful beings, just like men. But it's just a shame to see how what women go through in order to feel secure. And even when they get there, it's never enough. And we are using plastic surgeries. We're doing all of these things where I don't have anything against it. But you can see when people get addicted because they stop looking like themselves. And it doesn't have to be that way. There's something within us that is way too beautiful to just ignore it. But we have to make a conscious effort to wake up. And that's one of the things that I kept hearing from all the different shamans from different tribes around the world that I've met. And one of them was in Australia. So all I can say is that our root chakra is going through a process of purification. It's not just us, it's also the planet. And the one thing that we could do is be conscientious about our creative power. So as you observe all of these things happening around the world, as you see our consciousness separating in two, where one represents positive and the other one negative, project your love, project your light, so that we can once again bring into balance these two forces. So that we don't have to once again create another experience and where we destroy ourselves. We don't have to. And when we can actually let the consciousness of our planet, that we've grown, that we've matured, and that we're ready to create a vibrational space that can represent that. Where we can learn from other consciousness. And although they may not communicate in the way we do, but it's a consciousness. It's an intelligence that can help us in many, many ways. So I would encourage you during this time to not let government to confuse you and to pull you away from that instant where you have the opportunity to wake up and finally see that delegating your power to a minority of people or to a government is going to bring you freedom. Freedom is something that you cultivate within yourself when you start understanding who you are, not just as a human, but as a consciousness. And that we came here to share this space in peace and in love, not in hate or war. That only is showing our level of maturity. And I know that we have come to that place that we've matured enough to know better. So please rise in love, live your dream, and don't let anyone deter you from your purpose. And of course, this is not an easy process because we're moving away from a model where we were constantly giving our power away. But you don't have to do that anymore. And this is when each one of us can contribute with all the reason and the love that you have within. And as we share with one another, we can help change and raise our consciousness. So I hope you like this video. And I also hope that as you become who you want to be, you share your truth. It took me a long time to get here. But you know what? Who I've become and what I believe today is way more powerful than all of my fears. And although I still have some, they're not strong enough to get in my way. So now I choose to rise in love and in light. And as I see places like Australia going through what they're going through, I share my love. So remember, I posted a video where I'm talking about taking at least 7 minutes of your day to just do some deep breathing, calm your mind, calm your body, your nerve system, and then visualize light and love. And you can project in any direction about creating whatever goal you have in mind that makes you feel good. But in this moment, your energy is very much needed in all of these places where there is disaster happening. And our root chakra needs it more than never. So as we're moving close to the 10th of January of 2020, these natives are going to try to activate that kundalini to connect or create a circuit between all of this energy center. So please contribute and participate by sending that energy, by supporting these people, as well as helping these people there that are struggling and trying to figure out what to do as the element of fire is doing what it's doing, because it's not stopping. As a matter of fact, according to my friend, they're getting ready for another cycle. And in the village that I lived with my husband, they're in trouble right now. And what a lot of people don't know is that in Eden, the eastern, southeast part of the country, in that little place, there is a naval base. A naval base that has ammunitions, and they're afraid that those may explode. And that will create a bigger problem. So we need to rise in peace and not in anger and war. We've done that way too many times. So please think about it. And I hope that my video has sparked at least a little bit of that seed where you start discerning and thinking a little bit more. I love you. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I will see you next time.